This time on Poll Hub, you're forgiven. Oops, sorry, you're not. The Supreme Court overturned the Biden administration's student loan forgiveness plan this past June, but is the High Court's decision in step with public opinion? We discuss. Then, it's often a taboo topic, sex work. Legal protections vary by state, and now new digital technologies have given sex workers an added layer of protection. But you guessed it, there are downsides of that technology. We speak with experts who've researched this controversial topic. And are you vegan or vegetarian, or neither? It's a simple question that may not have a simple answer. Stick with us for Lee's Fun Fact. This is Poll Hub. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm Mary Griffith.
I'm Barbara Carvalho.
I'm Athen Hollis.
I'm Eve Fisher.
And I am Lee Merendorf.
Well, welcome, everybody. We've been coming and going with our summer vacation schedule, but school is back in session, and so are all of we. So welcome, especially Lee and Athen, who I think two of us are going to chat a little bit about something that has been in the news again, and it has been somewhat controversial. Which is Biden's suggestion and plan for student loan forgiveness. According to a Reuters Ipsos poll done earlier this year, almost half of Americans, 47%, support forgiving up to $20,000 in federal student loan debt for those receiving Pell Grants and $10,000 for those who did not. However, a solid 41% of Americans do not support any kind of student loan forgiveness for a variety of different reasons, which we will discuss. But Congress voted in May to restart the student loan payments this fall after a 3-year pause due to the COVID pandemic. Then in June, the Supreme Court overturned Biden's loan forgiveness plan that would have canceled more than $400 billion in student loan debt for about 3.4 million Americans. And this combination, in other words, the need to now start repaying loans that had been put on hold due to COVID, and the fact that the Supreme Court has overturned loan forgiveness, leaves an awful lot of Americans in a tight spot. So the Biden administration has promised a number of changes. It's looking to actually address the issue for almost 800,000 borrowers with a smaller program, but yet still going forward. The plans are obviously very popular among people who have student loan debt. 83% of Americans with student loan debt do support Biden's plan. But obviously, there are a lot of people who choose not to go to college. And one of the reasons that they do not choose to is because of the price tag and not wanting to be in debt. So what exactly does this mean going forward? First, for, I guess, the cost of college tuition, which we are very aware of, being employed and going to a private institution here at Marist College. And what does it mean for future graduates? So, Lee, first to you, yeah. What is really the issue at stake here? Because the data also shows that a college degree changes the trajectory of your earning potential over your lifetime.
It's seen as an investment rather than just throwing money at textbooks. I would point out one thing in this, and this is what moves me in the direction of supporting this. I probably would be there anyway, but I remember back in the Stone Ages when I was going to college, and I took out some student loans, which to me at the time seemed like a lot of money, and I didn't want to saddle myself with debt. By today's figures, it's a drop in the bucket. But what I felt at that time was that, and it's borne out by what's happened since, is that if you worked in the summer, if you worked while you were a student at school, you could actually take a whack at your tuition bills and your room and board bills. You could actually save up during high school and take student loans at some point, which would be paid off in a reasonable amount of time without too heavy a lift. Right now, the costs have grown much more than the income capacity of students to offset it. And as a result, you need to get some kind of student loan package or some kind of financial aid to bring down the cost and close the gap. But working in the summer and, during the school year is good for bringing in some money, but it isn't going to take care of the problem. So if you're somebody who wants to go to college, and you can be, low income, middle income. I mean, the cost is a lot, and you need to be able to find some assistance somewhere along the way, or you're going to saddle yourself with a debt that is, by today's standards, really, really high.
In fact, in some cases, in many cases, actually, especially if students are looking at graduate school or furthering their education, I mean, you are looking at something which approximates what we would have thought of as a mortgage on a house rather than just an education. Athen, you are an undergraduate, but soon to be graduating. What does this mean for future graduates?
Yeah, I am a senior, so this is something that I'm thinking about a lot now. I actually applied for the loan forgiveness program when the Biden administration first kind of unveiled it to the public.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being excited about it because this is kind of one of the only opportunities to not have this giant looming debt over my head when I immediately get out into the working field. And I remember getting an email being there's a court case against this this plan, the student forgiveness that you applied for and were accepted for is being put on hold. And just getting email after email for months being actually no one's getting forgiveness. And now obviously no one really is getting forgiveness on their student loans. And it's hard. Yeah, I've been working since I was 15. There's not a point where I didn't have a job, and I've been saving, and I have scholarships and financial aid. And it's kind of no matter what you do, you're still going to have debt when you come out on the other side. And especially if I'm looking at grad school.
If you wanted to go to grad school, would that debt be discouraging to you to proceed?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to take me a long time to be able to pay off my undergraduate degree. And grad school is something I will definitely probably need to go to be able to afford undergrad. And to be able to pay for graduate school, I'm at least going to have to take time off in between to save up money or find a job that will help me pay for it. Yeah, I think at this point, I don't think graduate school is something I can consider without that kind of help.
What about the issue? People who are against student loan forgiveness point to the kind of the fiscal responsibility. If you've kind of signed a promissory note to say that I will pay this money back, are we creating a culture where we're kind of letting people off the hook? So those who decided to take the risk and promise and to pay the money back, then kind of get forgiven, let off the hook, when those who may have been more cautious fiscally and taken more responsibility in terms of not borrowing the money say, well, had I known it would be forgiven, I might have done that too. Does it change the kind of the motivation going forward on other issues when people look to spend more than they have?
I think if student loan forgiveness, if that actually happened, it would give people more opportunity to be able to go to school and actually prepare their future afterwards. I think for me, if it didn't become a reality, and it might not, it's going to affect how I go into the future and affect future life choices. And I think some people don't have that choice. If you want to go to school, you have to take out these loans.
Sure.
There's not really an option at this point.
Yeah.
And for the private sector,
deserving students who work really hard, it really creates an unlevel playing field.
Yeah, and I don't think either one of these issues really addresses the problem. Certainly, forgiving loans doesn't solve the problem of college being more expensive. Granted, there are incredibly more amenities at college than when you and I went to college.
Sure.
Dorm rooms are not now 2 bunk beds in a small room with 4 people sharing it. They're at least at Marist College, they are private rooms with with common space in many instances. There are a lot of support services. There are mental health services and healthcare services, and there are lots and lots and lots of extracurricular activities that are available for students. So there's no question that the cost of college has gone up. The support of colleges in many states has gone down. So the responsibility for that has been placed squarely on the shoulders of those who choose to go
to
to
get
college.
to your original point, Barb, the opportunity to go to college is a way to get a better trajectory on what you're going to earn later, which Athlon also pointed out. So it's something that, as I said in the beginning, I think it's a good thing. And I'm sorry that the court stepped in and put the brakes on it. Hopefully the Biden administration will find a way going forward.
And perhaps there's a way of having more of a public-private partnership in allowing access to college degrees and postgraduate degrees, because certainly with technology, things are not getting any easier along the way. And in order to be able to obtain those jobs that will guarantee, or at least provide the opportunity for higher lifetime earnings, we need to all figure this one out.
It was once an underground industry, sex work. But now the landscape of sex work has transformed dramatically in the digital age. With platforms like OnlyFans and virtual marketplaces, the industry now finds itself on our screens and in daily lives. Still, debate about the industry, stigmatization, and new challenges created by the technology exist.
In New York, new legislation has sparked a heated debate about the decriminalization of sex work. Governor Kathy Hochul recently proposed a $1 million free healthcare program for sex workers. Advocates view this program as a vital step in addressing the discrimination sex workers face in the healthcare system, while others express concerns about potential incentivization of sex work.
Across the nation, the question of whether to criminalize or decriminalize sex work remains an ongoing debate, with differing views in each state.
There's also a movement to reshape societal perspectives and legislative strategies surrounding sex work. A prime example is in the state of Maine, which, as of last June 2023, saw the passing of a bill that removed penalties for selling sex while maintaining restrictions on its purchase.
Then there's Nevada, the only state where sex work is legally sanctioned. Licensed sex workers are treated as independent contractors, allowing them access to free health care under the Affordable Care Act. On top of having free health care, sex workers are also required to have health care in that profession.
And a 2020 Data for Progress survey found that a majority of American voters support decriminalizing sex work. 52% of respondents said that they either strongly support or somewhat support decriminalization, compared to the 36% who opposed it and 13% who were unsure.
And according to that same survey, 49% of voters supported ending vice policing of sex work, compared with 35% who opposed it.
And aside from the legal dimension, there's stigmatization. According to a 2016 Marist poll, 49% of Americans said that prostitution between consenting adults should be legal.
However, in that same survey, when respondents were prefaced that many sex workers advertise on the internet and meet customers at a variety of locations, 59% of Americans said that it would bother them if their neighbor were a sex worker.
Though many differ in their views of sex work and how it should be dealt with, the definition of sex work is broad and has evolved in our modern society. The rise of digital platforms like OnlyFans have transformed sex work. Sex workers have noted that platforms like these have increased the demand for digital content, reshaping the in-person sex work industry.
Dr. Samantha Magic is an associate professor of political science at John Jay College in the CUNY Graduate Center, and Dr. Melissa Hope Dittmore is the author of Unbroken Chains, a book discussing the links between human trafficking and the U.S. economy. The two recently conducted a study where they worked closely with and interviewed the sex worker community. In their findings, they share that technology presents a not-so-obvious danger to the economic stability of sex workers.
Actually, one of the biggest dangers to sex workers online is being removed from different online platforms. And so there's already a lot of existing research by sex worker-led community groups and also by academics showing that, for example, when sex workers lose access to things like Instagram or to Venmo, they lose their ability to not only advertise and reach clients, but also to collect income. And we all know that poverty and a decreased income makes everybody vulnerable to something. And so practices where people are removed from platforms or hidden, these also create dangers for sex workers.
I'd like to add to that 72% of our sample said that the reason they started engaging in sex work was for economic need. So this emphasizes the work in sex work and the income generating activity for those who need to be reminded that sex work for the worker is about money more than it's about sex.
Dr. Magic and Dr. Ditmore go on to say that sex workers are often shadow banned due to a sometimes overlooked component of sex work, the payment.
Platforms have suspended sex workers for violating terms of service. Sometimes they don't give a reason. But the most interesting one is payment platforms, because we found that when payment platforms suspend an account, they were very likely to keep the funds in that account. And it's unclear what happens to that money.
Yeah, we found that payment processors was the most common type of platform used. 65% of our survey respondents claimed that they use them.
And that when they lost a platform, the greatest hardship was related to the loss of advertising and then payment processors and social media, like places where you would meet clients. But actually, 24% said that payment processors were the greatest hardship.
In many ways, though, these platforms have created a safer space for individuals and have enabled sex workers to maintain anonymity and control over their work engagements. Digital tools have empowered sex workers to set boundaries, screen clients, and communicate on their terms.
And another thing digital platforms have done has introduced client verification systems and ratings, enhancing the safety of sex workers by allowing them to access crucial information about potential clients.
Dr. Magic and Dr. Ditmore go in depth and share what the different sides of sex work look like from their interviews.
We really found these incredibly complicated and detailed stories there of how platforms were essential to sex work on so many levels, right? Whether it's for advertising, for arranging interactions, for collecting payments, but also using these platforms and the implications of this spilled into interpersonal interactions in many ways. So, people who, for example, talked about being outed to their families as sex workers because someone shared their profile on a certain platform, for example. Whereas others talked about interesting things, how getting into sex work online through things like pornography and other kinds of online content creation actually increased their sense of confidence, especially for people we talked to who identified as living in a larger body and had faced fat stigma previously, and doing this kind of work, especially online, helped them gain more confidence in their body. So, we found a lot of the complexity really came out in the interviews, and we look forward to analyzing those further.
The sex industry has demonstrated that there is a market, if you will, for every body in this sense.
While the internet has made sex work more accessible to the masses, sex work still isn't quite considered as work.
Eve, when we first started discussing this topic to include in the podcast, to me, it seemed almost two-sided, a yes or a no. And as you shared your research, it really came to uncover that there's so much more to it and so many different dimensions to this debate.
Yeah, I think it's something that I noticed there wasn't that much public opinion about when I was researching it. And I had a discussion about the two lovely women that I spoke with. And we talked about how there isn't much research done on the digital aspect of sex work and how much it's changed, because especially after COVID, the sex work industry really has moved onto the internet in a lot of ways. And I thought it was an amazing topic, and I'm glad I got to research it.
Okay, we're going to switch topics now for the fun fact, which I must say I found surprising. So anyway, here's what we got. We have a Gallup poll, which has been taken over time. In 2018, 5% of Americans consider themselves to be vegetarians. 5 years later, that number has just gone down to 4%, not a huge drop, but certainly not an increase. Also in 2018, 3% of Americans consider themselves to be vegan. 2023, 5 years later, that number is 1%. So the arrows are down, not across or up. And that surprises me because, at least amongst those who I meet and talk to and get to know, I got the feeling that this is something that's taking off, not just on the descent. So, and I certainly am not in either of these categories, I should point out, in the interest of transparency. But so, Barb, tell me what you got on vegetarians and vegan.
Well, it's interesting because I think that we are all very health conscious. I think there has also been increase in animal advocacy over this time. I mean, in fact, Gallup has asked the vegetarian question since 1999. So this is a question that they have been asking over time. The vegan question is more recent. But nonetheless, I mean, we actually have seen a decline in people identifying as vegetarians. And I think perhaps it may be because of a change of interpretation of the question itself. I'm not necessarily sure that's the question that we should be asking now. I think that there are a lot of people who have a way that they eat, probably eating less meat than they may have in the past, but not necessarily defining them or describing themselves as vegetarian. So perhaps the issue is with the question itself. We ask a lot of political questions. We ask people to identify as Democrats and Republicans, and certainly partisanship and polarization has not declined over that time. But the proportion of people who identify as Democrats and Republicans has declined, and people are much more likely to identify themselves as independents. And I wonder if that's not a similar thing that is going on in this case, is that we have lots of ways of identifying and as eating, which doesn't necessarily include the strict idea of what a vegetarian is.
All right. So, Mary, so if you come home and announce to your family, we're switching from what we normally eat and we're going vegan, guys, what's the reaction?
Can we still have hot dogs?
That probably is the question. I might be the only person in my family who would still eat, although my boys would definitely enjoy French fries. So that would be the response. But Barb, that's a really good point you made. I sort of just looked at this very on a basic level and had the same reaction as Lee. I was a little bit surprised to see the numbers go down. But I am interested to hear from Athen because Athen, you're a lot younger than I am, so you may have a different view on this one.
Yeah, I'm a vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian for maybe 7 or 8 years now. But
Wow.
I think it's a lot popular in younger people. And I think, Barb, you're right. I know at least most of my friends, they don't label themselves vegetarian or vegan because it's kind of like a strict label. But they, at this point, barely eat meat. Like maybe if they're going to a restaurant, it's there on the menu like once in a while, but like day to day, like won't buy it or cook it for themselves.
Yeah. So we're finding insight into what the meaning behind these questions is. We now turn to Casey. Casey, what say you in your household or in your observations?
I'd agree with Athen. You can't label me a vegetarian because I do eat meat, but probably 90% of my diet is lacto-ovo vegetarian, where I eat eggs and cheese and milk, but I really don't eat a lot of meat. So can't call me a vegetarian. But also, so I'm coming at this from a different tact. When I saw this stat, is the first thing that popped to mind is how, and there are a lot of people that will disagree with me on this, but vegetarianism, especially veganism, has an not elitist, but a fiscal factor to it, where it's not a coincidence that as the money situation and inflation increases, that vegetarianism and veganism go down because food deserts increase, where rural and urban people cannot get access to fresh vegetables. And they've done fascinating exposés on what the fresh vegetables look like in these areas where they're just like shriveled little carrots and that's about it. It's fascinating.
So I feel like it's not a coincidence that that chart goes down as economy and inflation.
All right. Well, I'm not sure this was more insightful than fun, but it certainly was very, different perspectives on this. And my narrow one is, a Big Mac and fries. And obviously, that's just not the way to go for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is cholesterol. Anyway.
To all beef patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun.
Say that again.
That'll do it for Poll Hub this week.
Poll Hub is produced by the Marist Poll at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Mary Griffith is our executive producer. Casey Schaff is our production supervisor.
The Poll Hub team includes Athen Hollis, Emily Dupoint, and Eve Fisher.
If you enjoy Poll Hub, please consider leaving a review.
Positive reviews help other listeners like you find us.
If you have questions for us, tweet them at us at Marist Poll.
Remember, you can always tell your smart speaker to play Poll Hub, and with any luck, it'll cooperate.
Finally, wherever you listen to Poll Hub,
there is a subscribe button. Click it, and the latest episode will be ready for you in your podcast app as soon as it's released.
We'll see you next time.
To all beef patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun.